May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be to the greater honor and glory of God. Amen. In the Gospel of Matthew, we have these famous words from Jesus. Come to me, all that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yet in today's gospel reading, it's kind of a contradiction. That there's an old saying, no rest for the weary. Granted, I know the original was no rest for the wicked, but it got kind of changed around a little bit. No rest for the weary. Another saying is, no good deed goes unpunished. I do like saying that one. The gospel reading we have today from Mark is really kind of chopped up, but in both parts of it, it kind of has a theme of this idea of weariness and not being able to find rest. So let me kind of go over a little bit of this chapter 6 of Mark. So beginning in Mark 6, 7 through 13, Jesus gathers his disciples around him and he sends them out 2 by 2. And it says that he gives them authority to cast out, to heal, and to cast out unclean spirits. But then after Jesus sends them out, then we had the gospel from last week, which is kind of stuck in there at the beheading of John the Baptist. And then today, though, we pick up with Mark chapter 6, 30 through 34 after that. And so that's why it says, when the disciples came back, they were telling Jesus all of the wonderful things that they had been able to do in his name. And so Jesus says, well, now that you've done all that, you're probably tired, so let's go off to a deserted place and let's take a Sabbath. So they get in the boat and they go across the Sea of Galilee. And rather than finding rest, they find a crowd there. And so they're ministering to the people there. Ministry is hard work. Ministry is hard work. Doing God's work can be hard work. We don't realize how much, we just think that it's easy for Jesus. That he just goes and he puts his hand on Michael, I wish, and heals him of everything. Or he puts his hand on Sue, I'm waiting for him to put his hand on me. And then it's just an easy thing. But I've been watching the series The Chosen, and there's an episode in one of the early seasons where they don't really show Jesus, but he's healing people. He spends a whole day healing people and casting out demons. And the whole time that Jesus is doing this, his disciples are bickering among themselves over stupid, inane stuff. About who's doing what and who's not doing what, and who's doing more than the other disciples, and this, that, and the other. And then at the end of the day, after Jesus has finally sent the crowds away, he comes back to the group, and he is visibly exhausted to the point where he is shaking. And they said, oh, you want something to eat? No, I just need to go to sleep. So he bends down, says his prayers, and just, collapses. And so that kind of tells us, even though Jesus was divine, he still needed his human body still needs times of rest. And we're kind of that same way, that even in the midst of doing good work, we still need some time for Sabbath rest. But sometimes it's really hard to find when you have so many demands on your life. So after this takes place, this first chunk, that the crowds find him again. Then what's left out is Jesus goes and he all these crowds are there. They're in this deserted place, and there's nothing to eat. So Jesus, this is the feeding the 5,000 story. And so then Jesus says, well, let's get in a boat and let's go someplace else. So they get in a boat again, and they cross to another place on the sea. And in the midst of that, we have the story of Jesus walking on the water. So then the second part of the gospel today picks up where they've gone across the sea again, and the crowds have went around, they've founded him again, and they come in from all places, from the villages and the farms and the marketplaces. And they've come because of Jesus' fame, and of his ability to heal people and to help them with their demons. It's kind of, to me, it reminds me of the paparazzi today. So this is like ancient paparazzi. Jesus' fame has grown to the point where they're just following him around and harassing him. If they'd had cameras back in them days, there'd be all these flashing of cameras. As it was, they went around telling stories and spread his fame. But despite the fatigue that Jesus may have been going through, he still takes the time to minister to these people. I wrote down, Jesus is going to do what Jesus do. I know the grammar on that is horrible, but Tammy's over there cringing, this teacher. Jesus touches the lives of them, and he changes their life by touching them. But reciprocally, Jesus is also touched when he touches others, that he realizes the importance of his ministry and what he is doing, how he is restoring the lives of those people who are outcasts and the poor and the sick and the suffering. Healing comes in many forms. I've said that over and over and over again, especially when somebody is very chronically sick for a long time, and we as a church or we as a community are praying for that person and to be healed, and yet it leads to death. And then we ask ourselves, why? Why did not our prayers be answered? But if we look around, we see that healing has taken place in other forms. A reality is, at least in my ministry, when I provide comfort and healing to others, I find that I myself am strangely touched and changed. When I spend a night in a hospital with a family of a dying loved one, that I can't come away from that without being changed myself. Or spending time with a family at a funeral. Or even doing a wedding for somebody, being involved in the wedding, that is a celebration, and it makes me think about, my life with Lydia and the love that we have together. When we take the time to do a good deed for others, for the people, that we can be energized in that. It can be tiring, but yet on the other hand, we have something good happens out of that. And when we're touched like that, it's not a resentment. It's like, oh no, I've taken this time and I can't get it back, or anything like that. We are glad to do it. And I go back again to, we had that tornado over a week ago, and all the people who came to other people's help. And I doubt if any of them were resentful for taking the time to help other people in need, and how our whole community came together to help those, and is still coming together to help those people. Doing the work of Jesus is like an infectious disease that has no cure. But I don't think we would ever want a cure from that. We would, if anything else, we want to keep being infected by that feeling. It's like an addiction, a good addiction of helping other people. I imagine that every time that Earl and his group build a handicap ramp for somebody, that he's ready, energized to go build the next ramp, or the next ramp, or the next ramp. So I go back to that where I opened with Jesus saying, "Take my yoke upon you." And that yoke upon us, even it ends up being rather light burden. And it's something that we want to keep taking up each and every day for the cause of Jesus and his